Yo, sup Logan, sup Mop. Um, yeah, so I have yeah, Space Camp. Hello. Um, I am working on a project with some folks back out west, and one of our students is presenting on this work in November at the National Entomology meeting. I have to get some of these beetle IDs done before that happens so we can incorporate this data. So that's what we are going to be working on today. I've showed these before as explaining as part of this project, but all of this stuff down here, so like these 3.5-ish rows of beetles, all this down over here, that's what we're going to be identifying today. Most of them are the same thing, but I still have to check everything and then record which species are coming from which site. So I'm just going to start working through this and we shall see what happens. We're familiar with these beetles already, though. I know we've looked at these before. This is the genus Passamachus. Phoenix, what's up? Kelsey, hello. These are quote unquote warrior beetles. So these are a ground beetle. This is the group that I work on. Everything that we're going to be going through today is in fact a ground beetle. Um, there are 13 species of Passamachus in the United States. They are fairly diverse in the southeast. I have seen 5 different species since moving to Florida. But these ones are from New Mexico, where there is quite a bit lower species diversity. Um, and like I said, since these are all at least the same genus, we're going to be able to check characters pretty fast to make sure that it fits with the key. So I have that up on a second screen. I haven't figured out a good way to share that yet. But the first thing that we have to check on all of these beetles are these little hairs on the underside of the abdomen. And these are called ambulatory setae. Setae are just hairs. I don't know why these ones in particular are called ambulatory because they don't really have to do anything with walking. But the question essentially to separate these two is, do they have these hairs on abdominal ventrites 4 through 6? So it's pretty hard to actually see the hairs, and these hairs underneath tend to get broken off quite easily. But what you are seeing right now are the punctures where those hairs attach. So you can see right here, 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 and I think this bottom one is off screen, but you can see that there's a puncture here, here, and here. So even though I only see a hair coming out of this middle one on the right hand side, the puncture is where the seta or the hair was coming out anyway. So if I see those punctures, I know that it has these setae present. Yeah, yeah, Space Camp. It is sort of like a little follicle, except we've talked about these before. Setae don't regrow and they don't get longer as the beetle ages. So all of the hairs, these ones are not particularly hairy beetles, but um, maybe this one can get in focus. I knew what you meant. No big deal. Nope, that got worse. Let's go in a little bit. There we go. So these hairs that you're looking at now on the front of the front leg, these are here and these are present, but they don't get longer throughout the beetle's lifetime, and if they break off, they just go away. So it's not the same thing as a follicle, because a follicle is where, it's allowing extra growth to happen. Um, but in the sense that that is where that hair comes out of and that seta is attached, yes, very similar to the follicle. So the first thing we checked again were these little punctures here on the bottom of the abdomen. And that takes us to couplet 5 of our key. Pronodal and elytral margins vivid metallic green, Arizona only, or margins blue, or margins black, metallic blue, or violet. So for that, we have to flip everything over, and we will look at the edges of the body. Over there, zoom up just a bit. Logan, this is an HTM TX 350E. TX 30E. It's so it's actually pretty reasonable space camp. This setup with the camera and everything was like $380, which for a microscope of this quality and with the camera is nothing. I have this one over here. I'm going to grab my other microscope. I haven't hooked this one up in a while because you guys can't see things on it because it doesn't have a camera attachment. But this is a refurbished Leica S8AP0. Let me cut that back on that screen now. This one, if you were to buy it new, is about $8,000 to $10,000. I certainly did not pay that much. Like I said, this is a refurbished model, and it wasn't quite working when I got it, so I've had to do a little bit of tinkering and a little bit of repairs. I had to replace the light source and things like that. So this is crazy. So this one goes all the way up to 80x. The one that we're on right now, the scope that you're typically used to seeing with the scope camera, only goes up to 50x. So this one has 30 more zoom percentages on it than the one that we're used to using on stream. Thanks for the follow, whoever that was. I didn't see the name pop up. I think because my laptop screen is not the one that's on top right now. But yeah, so this is much more in the way. Hey, Tortilla, hello. This is more of like what I typically use at work. My one at work is even more expensive than this. But they can get very, very, very expensive. Just before I left Arizona, our department purchased an $85,000 microscope. and putting that thing together was maybe one of the most stressful things that I've ever done because I kept being like, wow, this piece that I'm taking out of this box right now is more expensive than anything that I've ever owned in my entire life. Um, so yes, how's everyone doing? John, hello. Not a problem. Thanks for stopping in when you can. Um, but yes, so all things considered, the scope that we run stream off of normally, very affordable, good quality optics for what it is. It's sold for people who do like micro soldering. So there's actually like a fan attachment that I could like suck the fumes off of if I was actually doing that sort of thing. People that are like soldering circuit boards and whatnot. That's what this is geared towards. But we're using it for bugs, and I think that's a better use. So yeah, for what it is, not bad at all. Is it the best quality optic? Is it the best camera? Is it the best microscope? No, but like if you're somebody trying to get into bug ID, this is a lot less cost prohibitive than you might think. It's a lot to invest all at once. I mean, $350, $400 is not nothing. But if you're looking for a microscope and you want to get more into doing bug stuff at home, I do recommend this one. You can also get it without the camera attachment. So if you just want to use it as a regular microscope and not have the camera connection and like the streaming aspect with it, I think it's down to like 300 bucks flat. So really not that bad. Again, all things considered, but it is what it is. Until I'll give you 40 bucks. I don't know about that. Donkus, hello. Welcome in. There, Logan, that's a valid question. That's a very valid question. I did see somebody in the I think it was like the STEM category who also had microscope stuff. I haven't ventured over there yet because we end up doing a lot of yapping here and it's not just straight science a lot of the time. But I think that could be like another untapped audience bit. I wish I could like select two categories at once. But some other people do it. They were actually soldering. They weren't looking at bugs. So I'm pretty sure they were using this exact scope, but for its intended purposes. I agree. I agree this is science. We definitely do science here. But we also do a lot of yapping and talking about Pokemon cards. So, you know. I've considered branching out, changing the category, but not really the biggest deal. XYZSS. Hello. Welcome in. Welcome to stream. But anyway, that's where we are. The next thing I remember, we're going through these for this research project that I'm working on. The thing that we are checking now is if the pronotal and elytral margins are metallic green or if they're black, metallic blue, or violet. Ooh, hot tub category. Nicole. Yeah. We're hanging out in here today. So, pronotal and elytral margins. So right now we are zoomed in on the back corner of the neck piece of the pronotum. Nicole, that's fake as shit. That's the fakest thing that's ever happened. I can't believe it. I swear you've been in here before. No, please don't ban Nicole. What if we have tree questions? Oh, damn. Okay. Well, she'll come back. So pronotal margins. That is the outside edge of the pronotum. So we're checking all along here and all along the edge of the elytra or the hardened wing covers. And I am not seeing vivid metallic green. I am seeing black. There's a little itty bitty tiny bit of blue right on the edge of the elytra. It's not very strong, but you can see it there right on the edge margin. I've thought about that a lot, John. Um, at least in the context of doing Beetle stuff, I've definitely talked about color not being my favorite thing to use as a character. But this has become very apparent when I was working through a big batch of IDs with a friend of mine who is colorblind. And so they were asking if the little punctures on the elytra are like green or blue versus red or gold. And he was like, I can't tell. I can't. He can only get so far in the key because that was one of the characters that they used was the color of these like little small punctures. And that's really frustrating because I mean, not for me, I can see color. But if I was colorblind, I'd be pissed that I couldn't identify my beetles unless I got someone to help me. Um, and yeah, it's definitely a debate. You know, a green. Not all greens are created equal. You know, a nice deep forest green is not the same as this like obnoxious highlighter green that I usually have on the sticky note for the title screen. Azor, they can you it's up to the people who make the keys to make them accessible, right? You don't want to just focus on color. So if you can do structure, it's better to do it that way. Um, but those species that you're only able to separate are like the part of the couplet is asking about the color of those punctures, but then they do go on to list some other characters that you can use. They're just typically less obvious. The way that the keys generally go, and if they're constructed well, the first thing in the sentence is going to be like either the most important, meaning it's the easiest thing to separate the two, or it's the easiest one to actually observe. You talk about uh, structural things happening first, then you get into color, and then usually the very last thing in the couplet is like genitalia with X, Y, or Z. It's like, okay, you can do all of this external stuff, or you can dissect it. Space Camp, yes, exactly. Fluffing. Um, you can get to the point of having to dissect it, but that's usually a little bit more difficult, a little bit more advanced. So if you can use those other things earlier on, it's better to do it that way. Um, but there are workarounds in that key specifically that I'm thinking of that ask about color. But instead of just being able to look at them, say if it's like green or if it's red, you have to pull out genitalia. Those colorblind glasses. I don't know. I don't know if they've worked. I don't know if they would work on the bug things. I don't know if how well they work in general. I don't know any colorblind people that have actually tried them IRL. But yeah, that could be. Those could work. Nicole, what is your unrelated insect preservation question? While we move on to the next couplet in our key. Oh, I hate this next one. This one sucks. So this next one is asking the prosternum intercoxal process produced apically, somewhat conical, or intercoxal process not so produced, blunter. So this is a fairly frustrating couplet that I have had trouble with, and I know lots of people have trouble with over the years. Because what we are looking at right now is, yes, tortilla, exactly, blunter than what? It's asking about the intercoxal process. We know that the coxa is that first leg segment that is attached to the body. So we are looking at, so this is a coxa, this is a coxa, this is the intercoxal process. Is it produced apically, somewhat conical, or is it not so produced, blunter? Very succulent insects like termites. You have to keep them in alcohol. But what about pinned insects and insects that aren't kept in? Are you talking about like just regular stuff on pins, like what we're looking at now? Nothing. You simply shove a pin through it, and then it lasts. Yeah, so it's exoskeleton, right? The exterior of the beetle or of any insect is made up of chitin, which is that exoskeleton material that's like the same thing as feeling like an outside of a lobster or a shrimp or a crab. Um, with beetles, their exoskeletons are extremely thick and extremely hard, and because of that, it basically seals off all of the juicy bits on the inside until they dry up. And part of what holds the insect on the pin is not only the pressure from like the top and the bottom of the exoskeleton, but it's also the gunk on the inside kind of like hardening against the pin. If you have something very juicy, like a grasshopper, they do rot sometimes. Um, so if you're going to be doing something super large like that, and like another reason why that doesn't work is that grasshopper exoskeletons are not as hard as beetle exoskeletons. So if I have a particularly large and juicy and voluptuous grasshopper, I will gut them before I pin them. But otherwise, once they've got a pin in them, you're good. There's nothing on the outside that we do to like setting spray it or preserve it or anything like that. It is just like 100% unadulterated exoskeleton that keeps everything together like that. So yeah, it's actually a pretty easy process. Once the specimen has dried, you're you're free to do whatever you would like with it, and as long as you protect it from like humidity and UV light and drastic changes in temperature and things like that, they're just good to go. Nothing to seal it. Mm-mm. It is purely bug on pin. That's all we got to do. They dry up, Nicole. So do you know how when you're pressing plants, you get them between those two sheets of things that's like not quite newspaper, but it's like that absorbent paper, and then you're pressing it, and then you put the whole press into the oven. During that process, because the plant is a lot thinner than the exoskeleton of a beetle, all of that water like evaporates into those pages. It gets wicked off, and then it dries out in like the very low temperature oven. When you do the beetle, it's pretty much the same thing, just imagine the walls of the leaf are just as thick as the exoskeleton of the beetle. So as it's drying over time, there is leaves it in the press. Yeah, you can do that too. If you're doing like a lot of them, it helps to have them dry quickly so you can like then get your presses back again. How do you prevent it from shrinking? There's no shrinkage. On certain things there can be, but again, the outside of the beetle is really tough like the outside of like a crab or a lobster. Once it's in that shape, it's going to dry in that shape. Like it's a solid piece on the outside. So the parts that are shriveling up are the goops in the bottom. The goop that's in the abdomen shrinks and dries up and like hardens to the inside of the exoskeleton. Logan don't know about lignin. No, I get what you're saying. I totally get what you're saying. But the thank you, Tortilla. Thank you. I was hoping we'd get there. Dendrochronology. Dendro is like the prefix for tree, and chronology is like time. So when you're trying to look at tree rings and things like that, that is dendrochronology. And a tree cookie is you basically just cut it and then you cut off a bottom slice and then you have like this big slice of a tree that you can count the rings on the inside. So that thing is called the cookie. And apparently, when the core shrinks and it can crack because the water content is evaporating out of the tree cookie. I've never had to deal with tree cookie shrinkage, so I'm not sure. But let me. Do I have anything that we can sacrifice? I think we can sacrifice this. All right, Nicole. So we got a beetle. And this has been on the pin. This is it's just dried on the pin. I didn't do anything else to preserve this. Hey Dimitri. Hello. It's okay. We'll get back to identification eventually. How am I gonna do this? So I'm just gonna pop the abdomen off and we're gonna go from there. So all of this in here, this is the abdominal cavity. Yeah, I did, Logan. Nicole made me do this. This is where all of the innards used to be. I mean, they're still there, but they're shriveled up. So this is like the gut and everything that have dried up as it was just sitting there pinned. Let me. Yeah, so in here is where all the former goo was. Yeah, it just dried out. But then up here, if we're looking now the other way, so we are now looking underneath the elytra and underneath the wings, like back up into the body cavity. Takalakupaku. Welcome in. Thanks for the follow. Um, so if we're looking at this stuff now, again, this is all muscle and gut and all of the insides of the beetle. But it's all just dried in there. As you leave them out on the drying board like this, which is very similar to, like you said, your friend leaving their plant press out, the water and stuff inside of it evaporates. The exoskeleton is not fully impermeable. So as it sits and dries over time, the water can evaporate out. And what that eventually does is, if you've positioned your legs in a certain position, the water in the muscles will dry out, and then the exoskeleton will basically just harden in that position. So that's why we have all the little brace pins that tuck legs and antennae where we want them to be, because once it's dry, it's basically going to stay in that position. The inside dries, but the exoskeleton on the outside is already solid, like when the animal is alive. So insects can't grow their exoskeleton for the most part. They're, exceptions to everything. Some of them can expand and contract and whatnot. But again, the outside of a beetle is just like really hard and rigid, and it's kind of like a suit of armor. The way that their exoskeleton works is that it's like an armor coating on the outside, and then all of the muscles and stuff like that attached to different points inside of the legs. How about for pupa, that's all just goo? Yeah, it is all just goo. But there's still an outside covering on it that is exoskeleton. You wouldn't pin a pupa, generally. You could, but you would need to do something to prevent it or to dry it out really fast, because that's a lot of goo that has bacteria in it that would rot if left kind of to its own devices. So for pupae, I would generally probably boil it at first, the heat will kill a lot of that bacteria, and then I would put it in a display or however I wanted to do it, and then put that in a drying oven. This is not like your home oven. Your home oven doesn't usually get low enough, but like a small drying oven that gets to like 100 degrees Fahrenheit, or what we used to do in Arizona a lot is we would just take the whole flat of bugs and basically just leave them on our dashboard and let the car cook them for us. And what that does is it speeds up that evaporative process, so all of the insides dry out quickly, all of the legs set quickly, and it basically it dries everything out faster than it would just normally sitting there. So the outside stays the same, the inside is the part that shrinks, but for some things like grasshoppers and things like that, where the exoskeleton on the outside is still hard, but not as hard as it would be in a beetle, you do get some shrinkage and things like that, where the abdomens will deform and slightly take on different shapes as it's drying. That's why we're trying to prevent that with those the blister beetles that we have in the freezer downstairs. I've tried letting them just dry normally. I've tried putting them in the actual oven, or into a drying oven. So my last resort here to try to prevent them from shrinking is to let them dry just very, 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 very slowly. So hopefully they don't collapse. Put our Thanksgiving drinks outside. Yeah, no, definitely. That was a fairly common Pennsylvania occurrence as well. But I haven't been able to do that in a while. So does that answer your question about the inside bits? Not a problem. All right. Now, Old Alphabet. Thanks for the follow. No, our 70-degree winters were not. Don't need that. Nope. Okay. Where were we? Oh, right. Our intercoxal process. So going back to here, we are to orient you on the body right now. We are looking at the procoxy, so we are looking at the front pair of legs, and we are specifically looking at this piece right here that actually goes between them. So this right here is the intercoxal process, and we are checking if it is produced apically, somewhat conical, or not so produced and blunter. This character has always been quite tricky because from this angle, the bottom of this process is about in line with the bottom of the coxa. But if you turn it sideways, you can see that it is in fact produced a little bit. It doesn't go below, it doesn't go below the level of the coxa, but it does kind of go out towards what would be the ground if the beetle was alive. So this character has always been tricky because it is produced apically, but it's not actually produced apically, it's produced ventrally. And produced just means like protruding or like extended, right? So this is a poor choice of character wording, I think, because again, this is the direction that we're looking at the beetle right now. So we're looking at it sideways. So the piece on the left is going to be pointing towards the ground when the beetle is alive. So that is the ventral portion. You've got your dorsal up top and your ventral portion underneath. So it is produced, but it's produced ventrally. It is not produced apically. And again, the reason, or part of how you can tell that is that even though it's produced going down a little bit, it doesn't extend past the bottom of this front coxa here. So right here is the coxa. This piece is about even with the bottom of the coxa here. If it was one of the other species, which we might get to one of the other ones, it's going to have a piece extending further down than the bottom edge of this coxa. So it would have like another, it would extend down this way. Frankie Viking, thank you for the follow. Welcome in. Okay, so that takes us to couplet 8 of our key, which says elytral intervals 7 and 8 costate, the 8th stronger to near apex, Arizona Arizona to Missouri, or intervals 7 beyond humeral carina and 8 not noticeable. So we're moving positions on the body now. We are checking the elytra, so the hardened wing covers on the back. And this is asking about the elytral intervals. So typically on a beetle, you have those like very defined lines going down the elytra. In this group, they're often reduced. And that's what you're seeing here, these little lines of dots going down. Those are essentially the striae. So instead of having like a really nice this guy, I guess. So instead of having like really nice, really defined lines on something like this, slow it down a little bit more. There it is. Okay. So instead of having these like super, super well defined and very like deeply impressed striae down the elytra, this group has fairly faint markings. So we have to count and see what they're doing over in striae 7 and 8. So we've talked about this before, but just to remind everybody, elytral striae, except for in one group, are counted from the middle to the outside. So this very solid line right here, down the middle, is where the elytra or the wing covers come together. So that is like the midline of the body of the beetle. So this line right here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So it's asking if intervals 7 and 8 are costate, meaning that they are ridged, or if 7 beyond humeral carina and 8 not noticeable. So for this, we have to turn it sideways, and you have to get a little bit of an odd view on this. And I don't know how well it's going to work. Okay, you can see it. So costate means ridged, or like a raised ridge is a costa. And so what this couplet is asking is intervals 7 and 8 costate, the 8th stronger all the way to the apex of the elytra, but the 7th still extended down that far. So when we were counting, this right here is 6. This like very slightly raised line here is 7, and then this one right here is 8. Yes, Nicole. This is Purrington and Drake 2005. It's the key to the Passamacus of the United States. These beetles are for a project that I'm working on with some friends out west, and we've got a student that's presenting on this stuff at the National Entomology meeting in Portland in a few weeks. And so we have a lot of other beetles for this project that we've sent to other people or that the students are identifying, but I got all of these beetles, so I'm able to do the IDs because this is the group that I work on. Passamacus are these big, dark warrior beetles, is like the common name that most people give them. We've looked at these before, but it's a type of ground beetle. And so this is what we're going through mostly right now. These all came out of pitfall traps. So they were just collected by they wandered into the trap. So there's a lot of Passamacus on here. There's a couple of other things, but it's mostly Passamacus. So I am basically just going through and checking the IDs on all of these things. And we're still on the first one. Yes, mouse mambo. That is the genus that we're talking about. Yep. So we're still working on this one. This is the first one, but I'm walking through the characters right now because after this, I'm going to be able to speed it up a little bit because we've looked through the characters that we need to check this genus, and as long as our next specimen has the same characters as this species, we know that we're going the right way in the key, or we will know where we have to change direction. So here, again, it's asking about striae 7 and 8. And you can see 7 is fairly lightly produced, but 8 is very strongly carinate. So that tells us that this is Passamacus duplicatus. There are not very many records of this one online. It's kind of a southwestern thing. But here is the bug guide page for it, for anyone curious. Yeah, so on here, on the bug guide page, it says discal intervals hardly traceable, which we looked at, right? Those middle striae on the elytra, you could barely find them. And then intervals 7 and 8 are costate. So that is our first specimen from our first site. And I am just going to add this to my data sheet that I will... I have to put labels on all of these later, so we're just working through the IDs right now. Then I will have to go back and do a little bit more work on them and send the data off to my collaborators. So that was the first specimen, and we have another specimen from the same site. So we're back here. It's another Passamacus. No doubt about that. Same large, dark overall body shape, where we'll start to see some similarities. So starting over again. So now that we've done the one, we have to go back to the very beginning of the key and check all of these different characters again. The first one, for those of you who may have missed it, were uh, abdominal segments 4 through 6 having ambulatory CD. Tadboat, yes. I'm working on a little bit of a project right now, so I need to get this done, ideally by the end of the night, so I can send it off tomorrow. So I was, gonna just work through it here on stream. So ambulatory CD are these pairs of CD that go down the abdomen, and they're quite hard to see on here, but again, just like last time, you can see the puncture here, here, and here, where those hairs actually attach. So, we know that it has this, so then it takes us to 5, which was checking the color. I don't see any green on the edges of this pronotum or on the edges of this elytron. So then we go back and we check the intercoxal process. It does not extend under the level of the coxa. So that's blunt. And then we check again the elytral striae. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is lightly carinate. And 8 has that same very distinct very distinct line that the last one did, right here. So I am happy saying that both of these, because they checked the same boxes, basically they all went the same direction in the key, that we actually have 2 Passamachus duplicatus from that one site. Great. 1 out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. 1 out of 27 sites. That one happened to have 2 specimens. Some of them happened to have 3. But these were pitfall traps that were only left for 24 hours. Typically, when you do pitfall traps, and the idea and one of the very helpful things about pitfall traps is you can set them and come back to them later. What a pitfall trap is you will dig a hole, and you will, at its base level, you dig a hole and you put a cup in the hole, and then stuff falls into the cup. It's all stuff generally that is active on the ground, which ground beetles are quite active on the ground. But the longer you leave them out, the more stuff it can collect, and it gives you a better representation of what can be found in that area. It's a good survey for activity density, not so much true diversity, because in 24 hours, most of these pitfall traps caught Passamachus. But Passamachus is a very active predator, so they are out at night a lot, feeding on things or trying to find food. As you leave these traps out for more and more time, you start to get more species, because maybe they're a little bit less active, but they're still in the area. So if they're only out for 24 hours, maybe they're not active in those 24 hours, but if we would have left it for another 2 or 3 days after that, we may have gotten a bunch more species. So the diversity, at least from what I can see, I only have 5 beetles here that are not Passamachus. But there are a couple of species of Passamachus that it could be. So even though they all look very, very similar, we have to check all of the same characters again. No, Kelsey, these are literally just cups that we put in the ground. Um, you can bait them. Ground beetles uh, are sort of hard to bait for because they're just generalist predators. But you can bait pitfall traps with dung if you're going for dung beetles, or carrion if you're going for carrion beetles, things like that. But no, this is a cup in the ground, and um, usually some sort of preservation liquid that can be like salt, soapy water. These were propylene glycol, which is a like a food grade preservative, so it prevents the bodies from actual density of species without the bait. Yeah, exactly. If you're looking for a specific group, um, you can definitely bait it one way or another. But the nice thing about ground beetles, like I said, is that they are just generalist and they're going to be running around regardless. And so at some point they will happen into your traps. But I had some friends in my master's lab who were looking at dung beetles that we would bait the pitfall traps with dung, and that's still surveying the dung beetles in the area because they're sensing that dung being there. But you're going to get a lot more dung beetles that way than just regular ground beetles because you're trying specifically to attract them. Okay, so we're on to our next site, and it's another Passamacus. Those cookies are so good and can't be made vegan easily. Rocksters, I think you're lost. Who knows? Who's baking? Is Chandler baking? Oh, Chandler got fired from Alveus. Oops. According to his stream title, I don't think that's real. Oh yeah, the tree cookies. But I think tree cookies would be vegan because it's a tree. So okay, flip it over. We have punctures for hairs. So they're there. And then we check the color. It is not green. We check the intercoxal process. It is about even with that coxa. And then we check our intervals 7 and 8. You're good, Roxers. No worries. Um, and again, we can see, just like the last ones, 7 is very lightly costate, but 8 is very, very strong. And that again checks all of our boxes for Passamacus duplicatus. We're 3 specimens in, but I'm already seeing a bit of a pattern. These were all collected at the same field site across a few different sampling efforts. So it's quite possible that most, if not all of these, are going to actually be the same thing. But that is still valuable information because that tells us that this is a very abundant species at these sites. And pairing that with some of the other insect data that we collected, there has to be a pretty high availability of food to be supporting this many of these very large beetles. So it gives you a little bit of information about the population density of this species in particular. But it also, if you extrapolate that, tells you a little bit more about the community that surrounds these beetles. Because there were other insects in these pitfall traps, mind you. This is not all of the stuff that we got out of those traps. These are just the ground beetles that were sent to me to verify because this is the group that I work on. So there are many, many other beetles that are associated with this project that are getting identified elsewhere. These ones were just sent to me because they're my group. Huh. Okay, so we'll start again looking for those hairs on the underside of the abdomen. And these hairs actually haven't broken off, so you can see them pretty well. It's not just the punctures, you can actually see those hairs right there on that like middle abdominal segment. And trust me, my camera's blocking another one. So it has the hair. So we're still going to 5. Pronotal and electral margins, vivid metallic green. So we flip it over. We check our margins. They are most certainly not green. So that's all right. Not green. We'll flip it over. Tad, it's a personal preference, honestly. I've gotten pretty good at it because I hated when people would like come into my office, or if I need to look at something not under the microscope. I hated it not being clear right away. Someone walks into my office and I'm like, who came in? What do you need? So I always adjust my scopes to having my glasses. And what I end up doing is like the bottom of my frame is actually the part that rests on the eyepiece. So very rarely are the actual lenses touching. So yeah, it's usually just the bottom of my frames. And yeah, it's quite frustrating for other people then to use my scope because you can adjust the eyepieces individually to match your prescription. So I could look through here and like it would be totally fine. And then when I would give it off to someone else, it would be more out of focus for them because the adjustments had been made to fix my prescription. So if I leave it at 0 and I don't make any adjustments on the eyepieces individually, and I just have it set basically for having my glasses on, if someone else was coming over to look at something in the scope, I could just swivel it over to them without them having to adjust the eyepieces. Because right now this is set for, good vision. If I were to set the scope eyes for my eyes and use it without my glasses, everybody else that would have to come look through my scope would need to adjust the eyepieces. So I used to use it without them, but as my eyes have slightly gotten worse, again, I don't like not being able to like look at my key on the book page or look up and talk to people with and not see very well. So that's why I keep it adjusted this way. And yeah, it's usually the eyepieces rest like either right below my frames or right kind of on my frames. Yeah, exactly. And if they have to adjust, you would then have to readjust back. So I do it this way, but some people, or if you have like a microscope that is very specifically yours that you don't foresee sharing or anything like that, you can adjust it for yourself and use it without the glasses. But this is what I prefer. 6 Pool, thanks for the follow. Welcome in. So we're going back to our key. Our pronotal and electral margins are not green. So this is not Passamaquis viridans. But now, let's check our intercoxal process. And it is slightly see, I hate this character. Frontal ridge, subangular. Okay. So it's slightly more projected, but it is not that projected below the bottom of the thing. This is still not extreme enough to be considered what is this? Produced apically. So we're going back to the same couplet asking about electral intervals 7 and 8. However, on this beetle, there's no ridge. So the electral intervals are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This should be 7, and there's 8. If we compare that to one of these ones that we were just calling duplicatus, this is the one that we're currently looking at, very smooth, versus duplicatus that has this fairly obvious shelf basically over here on the side. So this is not duplicatus. The new one that we're looking at here from the same site, this one is also a little bit bigger, but it doesn't have that external shelf, so it's not duplicatus. ID sounds a lot like Phasmophobia. Go down your checklist to narrow down what it could be. Yeah, basically, and you start off at like high levels too. If you're very new to this, you have to go through the checklist to even determine that it's a beetle, right? If you're just starting off, you're like, I can't tell the difference between a butterfly, a wasp, and a beetle, so you have to go through a checklist that gets you to beetle. Once you get to beetle, you go through a checklist that tells you, oh, this is a ground beetle, as opposed to like a ladybug. And then once you're in the ground beetle, you have to get it to genus. We're starting at the very last step, the very last checklist, because we know what genus these are in. So we are now just trying to figure out the species. So we're way deep in the checklists. But yeah, it is basically. I haven't watched a ton of gameplay from that, but you do basically, from what I understand, check off different like signs that it's giving you or readings on the meters that'll tell you like, oh, these 4 different types of ghosts or whatever are in this range. And then you can like mark off the other ones. You're like, okay, so I know it's not that based on this evidence. And that's basically exactly what we're doing. Trying different things. Yeah. Should I update to the Phasmophobia category? I think I get kicked out of there pretty fast. But to find guides or is whatever shows up in Google likely to be decent. I like Bug Guide a lot. Glacial. I've linked it a few times. In general, this is very helpful. I don't know if you're North American actually, but this is very helpful for North American stuff. But there is a field guide, like an actual physical book that I like a lot that came out just a few years ago. There is I don't know where it is in my house at the moment. Give me a second here. Let me turn this off. I'll cut this. I'll give you full Beetle for just a second. Let me run to see if I can find it. Boo, I'm back. Okay. I just had to make sure it was where I thought it was with all of my other field guides downstairs. Um yeah, and sometimes there aren't just aren't papers. So what I would recommend is this Princeton field guide, Abbott and Abbott. It's this one with the katydid on the front. This thing came out in 2023, I think. Italy. Yeah, 2023. Good one, John. Um, this is by several large margins the best insect field guide that I have ever seen. Right inside the opening cover is a key to the orders. So this is telling you, is it a beetle? Is it a wasp? Is it a sawfly? Is it an ant? Whatever. And it's a little bit chaotic. The layout of it is not exactly my favorite. Yeah, Roxers. Amazon, it's really not that expensive. Princeton also will generally be doing their fall sale maybe about now. So if you go to Princeton University Press's website, you might be able to get it for about the same. Bye, Nicole. Have fun touching ocean grass. Um, but yeah, so it is still like a dichotomous key. It's just flowchart dichotomous key. So like you start over here, and the first thing that it asks you is wings present, membranous, not concealed, or wings absent or membranous, hind wings concealed by thickened covers, or half leathery, half membranous forewings. So it basically gets you through all of the orders as long as you follow the steps correctly, and then it tells you which page your thing starts on in the key or in this field guide. So if you go through this little our little flow chart and you get to Coleoptera, the beetles, that takes you to page 294. So then if we come through here to page 294, it gives you some nice background on beetles, like at the start of the chapter. and then it gives you a little bit of anatomy and some importance to humans and how to collect stuff. So some of these characters that we're looking at right now, you can probably see in this diagram right here. And then after that, there's some silhouettes. So if you've just got like a vague shape of your beetle and you want to try to match it this way, you can. But then, and this is the part that I really, really like, is that it has keys. It has like a flowchart key with pictures for all of the beetle families in the US. So it's the same structure as the key in the front. With all of your little lines and diagrams and things like that. But this is several pages long, and it will take you through all of the beetle families in the US. So this is basically like what I've been doing on pre-chat chats, is going through and talking about a lot of these identifying characters. And then once you get to a group, you have pages that will tell you about them and have pictures of representatives. Elder Soan, hello. How are you doing? We're looking at a field guide right now. It has diversity, which is great. So it shows you like, oh, these ones up top here are all of the clown beetles. Then you've got your feather wings, your carrion beetles, your staphylinids down at the bottom. And it tells you a little bit more about them, and it has pictures of some of the more common, members of that group. And it's not just like that for beetles. If you want to learn about caddisflies, it also has the key and the pictures and all the summaries and everything about caddisflies as well. As far as I know, this book has a key to all of the families of all of the insects in the United States, which is crazy for $16. I just really like the way that this is laid out. I like the pictures they include. I like the information they include. I really like the fact that there are keys to things. So this is like by far the field guide that I've recommended to people the most now. And even in the back, there's like a whole glossary of terms, explaining what some of these characters are in the key if you're having trouble with the identifications. I'm like hella blown out right now on the camera. But yeah, so there's a glossary of terms back here that you can use to check everything. And yeah, it's quite good. I have picked up just about every field guide for North American insects to test and give out and talk about. There's lots of students that I have that are like, okay, this textbook is not exactly helpful for me out in the field. What do I use? That is the only one I recommend at this point. John, you're not dumb. You're not dumb. You're just starting to learn, and that's okay. We were all there once. EPUB and PDF. Interesting. Mouse, yeah. I don't know. I don't have experience with that, so maybe someone else here has input for you, but as bad as this sounds, I don't really need a field guide anymore. So it's just a good thing to have on hand, and it's a good thing if you are just getting into it. I still take my bird field guide out, and I do like carrying the physical version of it. But it can get heavy. So I totally get it. But for insects, I think I'm at a point where I generally don't need a field guide. So that's the one I recommend. I do think that is uh, a very worthwhile purchase if you're looking to get into insects. All right, great. You guys are figuring that out because, like I said, I don't really have much input there. So back to our beetle. We've decided that it doesn't have that uh, carinate eighth interval. Now, our next couplet says humoral carina of seventh interval short, large specimens 22 to 35 millimeters, Arizona to Kansas and Arkansas, or humoral carina long, much smaller 21 to 28 millimeters. So we can. I lose my damn ruler every week. Um, we can look at the carina in just a second, but if we are looking at the full body of this specimen, we are running about 30 millimeters, um, which is above the smaller range and square in the middle of our other range. So that's a good indication, but as we've talked about before, there is considerable size variation between individuals in the same species. So we are checking whether the humoral carina of the seventh interval is short. Does it tell you what short is? No, it sure doesn't. So that's not exactly the most helpful. But if we zoom in here, the humerus on the beetle elytra is basically the shoulder. So it is asking about this piece right here. I don't even know if you guys are able to see that really, even that that's raised. So we are looking at just this little piece right here. So this is the beginning of the seventh interval, and it's just asking about this little raised carina piece here. Whether that is short, quote, or long. There isn't really a good reference here for what is short versus what is long. But I would say that's pretty damn short. And because this specimen is in the middle of that larger size range, I am pretty okay calling this Passamachus californicus. Short king. That's funny. So, side by side, these look very similar, right? If you had those in a box next to one another, like if they were just sitting there like this, you would have a very hard time telling those apart, right? But as you just saw, we went through the actual identification process, looking at basically single hairs on the underside of the abdomen and all of these very small character reference points. That's why identifying things from pictures is very tricky. Um, with something like this, are people ever going to get pictures on the underside to be able to see if it has those hairs or not. No, those hairs are underneath the beetle as it's like on the ground. So if you just got a top down view, like you just had there in the camera, it's it's pretty hard to separate them. And so it's okay when I'm outside. It's past Macus. Yeah. If you're not 100% confident, I think it is fine to leave things at genus. And there are a lot of entomologists that have a, I'll say, an ego thing about being able to identify stuff. It's their taxon group. They know it better than everyone else, blah, blah, blah. But most of the time, the pictures that you're getting sent are not good enough to confirm. You can go the vibes based route, like we talk about in chat chats a lot, how, after a certain amount of time, you've seen enough of them that you can separate them based on kind of like vibe. But when the separating character is underneath or something like that, it's pretty difficult to, at least to me, to justify potentially being wrong at identifying it to species when people who are asking me for identification are like, wow, he got it to genus. That's incredibly impressive. Right? Like, I don't need to identify it personally. I don't need to identify everything to species from photos because in general, the people asking for that don't know that that's a very difficult thing to ask for. And whatever information that I'm providing in terms of identification is better than where they were standing before. So I don't really have a problem with that. But because this is a research project and because we are trying to figure out diversity at these sites, I do need to identify them. But because we have the key and because we have the microscope, we can do that. So we shall move on and keep tracking here. Ooh, that's no good. We're gonna skip this. Better be broadly right than specifically wrong. I agree, Tortilla. Are we dark again? Did my settings fuck up? It must have. We'll apply that. We'll click OK. This is Bembidion, which is one of, if not the largest genus of ground beetles in the United States. There are almost 300 described species in this group, and they're quite small. So you can see that this one is on a point, and let me get it better in focus for you guys. Nope, too far. Back down a bit. Yeah. So it's a very speciose group. A lot of them are quite tricky to identify. And I know for a fact that I am going to need higher magnification than what this microscope can offer. So I am just going to note that this is a Bembidion species. And when we are done here going through some of the rest of this stuff, I will bust out the big scope and come back and work on this guy. And I it was very appropriate that we were talking about not identifying things beyond our means right before this showed up. This is a very, very tricky group. I might have to dissect this thing. I don't know. Um, this is not a group that I'm very comfortable with because there are so many and because they're quite difficult. There aren't a lot of collections that have really good reference material of identified specimens. So then when I'm trying to figure out what a character is, I will go to a collection, try to pull out an individual that's supposed to have that thing. But if somebody's not confident, they're not going to have identified it further. And so it's like this whole feedback loop of like, there's no reference material because they're hard, and because they're hard, nobody's identifying them, so there's no reference material. And it's this whole big cycle. I've been getting better at this group, but it's just not going to happen with this microscope right now. So we shall put that guy back over to the side and move on to our next move on to the next site, and then I will have to go back and identify that guy later. So we're back now to another Passamacus, and buckle in. This is the repetitive part of the stream because we have got 8, 10, 12 more Passamacus specimens before we get to a different thing. So we are just going to go through that same checklist that we've been going through before. Punctures on the bottom, yes. Green up top, no. Intercoxal process, pretty blunt, not produced apically. And has those two ridges on the elytra. So this is back to duplicatus. This site has 3 specimens, so 1 P. duplicatus. We will check this next one, but based on size, I'm going to say this one is not duplicatus. So it has the CD underneath, has those ambulatory CD or those hairs. It is not green. It does not have the conical intercoxal process, but then it also doesn't have the carinate thing here. But it does have a short carina right here. So this is another Passamacus californicus. The orange-ish crest. Let's take a look. Let's see if we can get in there good enough to... Might be easiest to see over on that side. Cheeto dust. I don't know if you can see it super well, Rocksters, but those are... Oh, I just totally moved that specimen. Definitely not going to be able to see it now. Hold on. So that line right between the pronotum and the rest of the body is actually a line of CD. So those are hairs, and you can probably see them a little bit better on the back here. If we zoom in on this. Yeah. So it's basically like a little collar of hairs, and essentially what it's doing is sort of like that little sweep thing that's under your door. Um, if the beetle was to get dust or sand or whatever up underneath the pronotum, but between the pronotum and the mid thorax, it's going to be like very irritating and cause rubbing as the head is moving. Yeah, exactly. Tortilla keeps crud out of the joints. Um, so yeah, that's what that's for. But there is other other crusty bits. I know this one doesn't have very much, but one of these other ones did have a fair amount of yeah, so like this stuff. Not really sure what all this is. It's very possible that this stuff is just dirt from outside, like that's still stuck on the beetle. I didn't take any measures to clean these, so you know it's very possible this is like wild dirt. Um, it's also pretty close to where the pin came out, so if Nicole was here and not out touching grass, um, actually, yeah, I think that is what that is. Um, you can see where the pin came out of the insect, and it is now like leaked over onto the underside. So I think that might be inside goo on the outside. Yes, Tortilla nailed it. So I think that's what that is. Um, and if that is what it is, it's very easy to clean off. So if this was like blocking a character that I needed to see, I would just take a little bit of a Q-tip or even the head of a pin, spray it with some alcohol, and then just rub it or scrape it off. It also, and this is also makes a lot of sense, because these were in a trap. There is that preservative that's called propylene glycol that was keeping them from rotting in the pitfall trap, but that has a much higher evaporating point than water does. So even if the insects are dry and all of the water is out, the propylene glycol generally can keep the legs and stuff pretty movable. And as it sits there, the propylene glycol can leak out under the specimen. Um, and so that's another possibility. But it is mostly mysterious goop. Probably insides or propylene glycol, or the ones directly around the joints, like we showed earlier, are probably just going to be hair. So let's run through this one, or run through again. Has punctures, is not green, does not have the conical process, has the the two costae there that are raised. So that is another duplicatus. So that sample had two duplicatus and one californicus. Moving along. Two beetles this time, more Passamacus. You can check. Punctures, yes. Green, no. Conical process, no. Raised 7th and 8th interval. Yes. So this is another duplicatus. Oh, here we can see pretty nicely. These CD are not matted down like the other ones were. Brock says if you're still here, look at that. Nice fine hairline. Yeah, so that's again at a joint, so that's where the head is actually attaching to the pronotum rather than the pronotum attaching to the body where the other side was. So right in here is that hair that you're looking at. And a couple of other neat details. I know we haven't actually like zoomed in on this a ton since we've been trying to do larger, like rougher IDs. But I think the mandibles are pretty cool on this group because they're striated. There we go. So this is a predatory group. They've obviously got fairly large mandibles. You can see these ones are actually crossed in front of the head. But they have these like longitudinal ridges or these wavy lines on them as well, which I think are pretty cool. Bees, hello. Beetle speed run. Kind of. Yeah. We've been taking our time. We've already almost been here for 2 hours. That's crazy. Um, I have samples here that are for a project that we're working on, and a student that we're working with is going to be presenting this data at a big conference next month. So I need to finish the IDs of these beetles so I can get that information to our student. And we are working through it. And the reason that it feels like a speed run is because a lot of these beetles are the same genus. So we have checked the identifying characters and like figured out what we need to look at to separate these things. And because we now know like this is the order that we have to check things in, we don't have to keep going and looking at the literature every single time. So for this group, these first couple of couplets, the things that we have to look at. Oh, there's more goop. That's a lot of goop. Gross. But you can see like I'm just taking this off with a pin right now. It's kind of sticky, so this is making me think that this is the propylene glycol that has leaked out and condensed. But yeah, you can see how much of that we just took off with just scraping it with a pin. But yeah, lots of sorting. Everything is grouped right now by the site that it came from. So they're already sorted, but I'm doing the IDs and then I will have to put labels on them a little bit later. So the 4 steps that we're going through are first checking the underside for these punctures. So there are these little hairs on the underside of the abdomen that are very hard to see in the scope, but you can see like this pocket here and this pocket here where those hairs actually attach to the body. So that is the first step that we're checking. The second thing we're checking is if the edges of the elytra and the pronotum, so these pieces here and here, if they're bright green or not. We haven't seen any green yet, so we know it's not that species. And then we're also checking, and this is the kind of the funky one, this intercoxal process. So this little piece sticking right here between the front legs, whether or not it is in lateral view about even with the bottom of those front coxa, or if it's projected down further. And this one is a little bit I think this is one of the harder characters that we have to look at for this group, because this one, even though it does have that little knob there, is blunt in accordance to what this key is asking. And then our most common species so far has also had these last two electral intervals. So these pieces, these like lines that go down the elytra, where these last outside two are raised. So this one you can see goes most of the way down, and then this one is a lot stronger right here. So those are the four things that we've been checking on all of our specimens, because that is how we have gotten to this one species in particular that we have seen a lot of. So we go through and we check all of these. And if for whatever reason any of those characters are different, we then have to take a look at seeing if we have a different species than Duplicatus. But those two from that site were both Duplicatus. And all of these beetles are from the same site over the course of a few months of sampling. And so all of this information is telling us like a little bit about what the species composition is at that site, but it's telling us a lot about the density of this particular species. And if we extrapolate this with some of the other insect information that we've been collecting out there, it can also tell us a little bit about what insects or like what the food source is like, because these are big predatory beetles, so they need to be feeding on other insects. So if there's a very robust community of these beetles that take a lot of food, there has to be a pretty robust community of other insects that these beetles are eating. So this one has punctures, is not green, has the flat process, and then has the raised intervals. So that is another Duplicatus, and there was just one from that site. So again, moving on. Ooh, this guy looks a little funky. So this is something interesting that I don't know that we've talked like a ton about. Is how, I mean, we know how the body parts are attached, right? We know there's a head, there's a thorax, and an abdomen. But all of these joints on the insect, like where these plates and stuff attach, are membranous points of movement. So even though this is this insect is like hard on the outside, you can see on this specimen in particular how the head is not like fully seated into the pronotum. And that is just something that happens when it gets pinned sometimes. And you can actually, this is a crazy view. If we look behind the head, field guide, get the EPUB PDF, can be transferred into some devices. Cool. Thanks, Mouse Mamba. Thanks for that update. So right now we are kind of looking behind where the head is supposed to be attached. And we are actually finding that part of that membrane back there ripped. Those struts that we're looking at right now are actually the muscle attachments. So right now we are looking at some of the musculature that allows the beetle to move its head. And this membrane that attaches the pronotum segment to the underside of the head has ripped. So this is not how it would look in nature, because then their insides would be falling out behind their head all the time. But this happened probably in the pinning process. It might have gotten a little bit waterlogged, so the membrane got thin. As I was pinning it, I could have bumped it on something and knocked the head a little bit loose. But yeah, so this piece down here generally shouldn't be open like this, because that would be letting all of the outside stuff into the head cavity. When the boot on a CV joint tears. Yeah. Or just like wear and tear over time, things giving out and getting little holes in it. So that's why this one looks a little bit funky in terms of like the head being at a very strange angle compared to the rest of the body. It's because that membrane has torn and it's not seated. It's not seated as we would expect, because that membrane has torn, which is why the head is at this very funky angle for this thing. So that's not going to affect anything. We can still check. We have our CD down there. We have no green up top. We have the basically even intercoxal process. And then we have the two shelves, or the two carina on the elytra. So this is another duplicatus. We've got two more from this site that look to be also duplicatus. But again, as we saw, we had those two Californicus so far. So we have to check every single specimen just in case there's something different. So we've got punctures, we've got no green, we've got even, and we have the carina. And this is what I've talked about before with my general process of sorting. When you're able to like very quickly familiarize yourself with a key and remember like, okay, I have to check the punctures, then the color, then the intercoxal process, and then if it has these two carina on the seat on the elytra, it's the same thing. Muscle Mason, thank you for the follow. 420. 420 followers. Hell yeah. Chaos, thank you for the sub. Thank you. Yes, blazing followers. This is excellent. Thank you, everybody. Who knew this many people cared about beetle identification on Twitch? Who'd have thunk? Uh, 32 CR. Yes, okay. It is that one. So that site had 3 specimens that were all duplicatus. All right, we finished the first row. We finished the first row of our beetles. We've got 2 more rows that are about the same size, and then just 3 additional specimens after that. So many more beetles could have Twitch accounts. I want beetles to have Twitch accounts. All right, we've got 3 more. We have 3 Passamacus before we get to a different beetle. And this, I think, is one that we'll actually be able to identify. Not like the Bembidion that that I had to put off for later. So let's go through these last 3, and then we'll look at something a little bit different. Punctures, yes. Green, no. Flat process, yes. Carini on 7 and 8, yes. So duplicatus. Punctures, yes. Green, no. Flat process. Ridge on 7 and 8, yes. A second duplicatus. And 3 from this site. Punctures, no green. Flat process. Ridge on 7 and 8. So that site also had 3 specimens, and they were all Passamacus duplicatus again. So far, we have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 Passamacus duplicatus, 2 Passamacus californicus, and 1 Bembidion species that I will have to check out a little bit later. But now, something exciting and different and new. This is a different type of beetle. Well, it's still a ground beetle. Let's get it in focus for you guys. Turn it so we can get maybe a full length view across the bottom. Ta-da. Okay, so this is a different beetle. It doesn't have that quite the same separation between the head, or between the prothorax and the rest of the elytra. It doesn't have quite as prominent of mandibles. And if we look down the back, this might be a real pain in the butt for you guys to see, but maybe not. I need to turn my light back down. Okay, we've got it okay in view right now. It's not exactly the clearest for you guys, but you can see that there are rows of hairs. Well, one along like the bottom outside edge of the elytra, but then also row of hair there, row of hair there, row of hair there. So that's pretty neat. This is a lot more hairy it's also got like very well defined elytral striae. So you can actually see those lines very clearly going down the wings. Yes. Okay. So this is not only a different species, this is a different subfamily of carabids. So it's still a ground beetle, but this is now in the Harpalini, which is the biggest and most diverse subset of the family. So this is a much larger key to go through, but very thankfully, um, this one is pretty easy to actually identify. So it won't take us very long, but we are going to look at some different characters right now that are going to help us along the way. Okay. So the first thing that we're looking at, and this is going to be hard to show or explain because this one won't have it. But the first couplet says, head each side, anterior eye and dorsal antennal insertion with prominent angulate projection, ventrad projection with preocular sulcus. So what the fuck does that mean? That is asking. Anterior eye means in front of the eye, but above the antennal insertion. So we have to look up here on the head, in front of the eye, and above where the antenna attaches to the head, with a prominent angular projection. Seraphs, hello. Welcome in. Doing some little bit of light Beetle ID today, nothing heavy. Even though I just read the most diabolical couplet known to man. So we are looking in this area in front of the eye and above the antennal insertion. Does that area have a prominent angular projection? Now, speaking from experience, that projection would actually cover the base of the antenna. And we can pretty clearly see where the antenna goes into the head. And this little piece, even though it is very slightly projected, is actually round. It's not angular, which would generally refer to like a 90-degree bend. So it's not that. We know it's not that one particular species. Cratacanthus dubius, cool beetle, not this beetle. Then we have, it's another doozy. Ooh. Snakefly and beetle, welcome in. You have come to the right place, my friend. No snake flies, lots of beetles though. Lots and lots of beetles. So this is another pretty intense couplet. It's another long one. But again, should be something that we can rule out pretty quickly, pretty easily. Let's just get that back in focus for you guys so you have something to look at while I read this next nightmare. Okay. So, front tibia with outer apical portion expanded in the form of a broadly rounded plate, apical spur broad, about half the length of preapical spur, hind tibia with both spurs spatulate, integument pallid. Okay, again, what the hell was I just saying? It's asking about different things on the front leg. So the outer apical portion expanded into the form of a broadly rounded plate. That's basically asking if the front tibia, so this portion right here that you guys actually can see in focus pretty well right now, this piece, if that were expanded into basically a shovel shape. Grunkles, summoning demons. Basically. Is this outer apical portion expanded into like a shovel? No. So we can tell that, we can see that there's like a much pointier end right here. So we know it's not that. But it was also asking about spurs on the hind legs. But maybe the easiest character to look at here is this last segment where it says integument pallid. That basically means exoskeleton pale. The species that is asking about that has the shovel. Give me 1 second. The species that it's asking about, if it has that shovel and it has this pale exoskeleton, whatever, is called Geopinus increstatus, which is definitely another demon summoning spell. Jade Kitten, thank you for the follow. Welcome in. And that looks like this. There's a bug guide link for it. Integument pallid means that the exoskeleton is pale, and this is very clearly not pale. This is a very dark, I would say, verging on black exoskeleton. Compared to that one that I just linked where it is very like light tan and sand colored. So even if none of the rest of that, like the broadly rounded plate or the hind spurs or whatever, made sense to you, that last little bit about the pale exoskeleton helps. So, okay, we know it's not Geopinus. So the couplet that we have to follow is front tibia with outer apical portion extended as prominent spine, or not thus modified, apical and preapical spurs similar in length, hind tibia with spurs more or less slender, lanceolate, not spatulate. We don't have to worry about that. That's basically all of those things are the opposite of what that tan beetle would have been. So we can move on from there. Okay, another doozy. Front tibia with outer apical portion extended laterally as a prominent spine. Subequal in length to apical spur. The latter slightly shorter but much broader than preapical spur. Pronotum with lateral margins plurisetose, seedy long, elytra with at least odd-numbered intervals with a row of large setigerous punctures, even-numbered intervals with or without seedy. So that is another gigantic mouthful, right? This is this is heavy tortella. Like I said, this is the largest subfamily of ground beetles that we're working in right now. And so the keys have to be a little bit more intense because there's just more things that you have to weed out. And yes, I am the picture flowchart. Yeah, that would be helpful, wouldn't it? Um, so the front tibia, the front leg, the part right before it attaches to the tarsi, with outer apical portion, so outside tip extended laterally to the side as a prominent spine that is subequal in length, meaning about the same length as the apical spur of the tibia. So, if we look at this leg that we have had in focus this entire time, would you say that this is expanded to the side in the form of a prominent spine? Tortilla says sure. She doesn't seem very confident, but she should be confident because that's correct. So, okay, we've checked off one box, but we want to make sure that we're going the right direction. So we have to figure out what else, if the rest of this checks out. So if is that spine that we just looked at about the same length as the apical spur of the tibia? So if moss species. Moss is tricky. I never got into moss, but yeah, it is. It's definitely hard. Um, and the reason that these things are so the reason that these couplets are written the way they are and not the way that I am explaining them to you is because the anatomy and the anatomical differences between these things are very precise, and they're being used essentially for people that have a background in this. This key that we're looking at right now is not something that we would give a general entomology student. This is something that, like, after you've already gone through and you're more comfortable with using keys to identify things, then you start getting into these sorts of really in-depth ones that take you to genus or to species. So it is tricky because a lot of, if not most of you, if maybe all of you, don't have a background in doing this, but some of you do have experience keying out other things, like Mouse Mambo here apparently is working with moss, which is very cool. I don't know that I could just pick up a moss key and start going through it because it has specialized terminology that I don't know as a beetle person, and these beetle terminology is stuff that, like, most other people don't know. So this happens. Okay, we have that spine. Is it almost equal in length to the apical spur of the leg? So here we are looking to see if this is the apical spur over here. So it's coming off of the apex of the tibia. So if this spur over here is about the same length as this one over here on the left-hand side. Grungles, I'm glad to hear that. I think this stuff is all really cool. And part of the thing that, like, really, really hooked me on entomology was getting to see this stuff up close like this. Silly MZ, thank you for the follow. Welcome in. Is getting to see stuff up close like this. You know, everyone has this idea of like, oh yeah, like, you know, I know what bugs look like. But when you get them up close, they really have all of this ridiculously fine detail that you would never see without a microscope. And that was very much like the aha moment to me of like, wow, I want to do this forever. And this is the thing that I want to do for the rest of my life. Was getting excited and seeing this like whole other world that just you usually don't see. And you know, nowadays people are doing a little bit better with macro photography, and you get to see some of that stuff even in live specimens, which is really, really cool. Having things under the microscope has always been my favorite part of working in this field. So that piece of the couplet is asking if the spur that's going out to the left, god damn it, if this technical difficulties, if this spur is about equal to the length of this spur right here. Oh, fellow entomologist. Hell yeah. Welcome. Do we know each other outside of this? Or is this our first time meeting? Regardless, if you're interested, there is the Discord. You can select notifications in the role selector to get notifications for my streams, but we do have a lot of discussion in there. This was built off of a community from another Twitch channel that is doing a lot to promote bugs. So if you want to join and hang out in there, love to chit chat more about what stuff you're finding. And, you know, if you want to help with IDs and stuff as people post them, that would be pretty cool. But another entomologist, that's very exciting. Is that spur sub-equal in length? I would say yes. So, okay, we've now checked 2 of those boxes. Pronotum with lateral margins pluricetose. We know pronotum. Pronotum is we've covered that a lot already. But the pronotum is that area that's basically the top of the prothorax, kind of behind the head here. And this couplet is asking whether or not the pronotum is pluricetose. Pluri, like plural, means many. And cetose refers to those hairs or those setae that we've been looking at before. So this is another one where it's going to be, I think, kind of tough to make it super visible for you guys. But it's asking if this lateral edge of the pronotum has many setae or if it just has like a pair. So let's get it over to this side. Back out just a little bit more. So in frame right now, there's at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 setae. And if we come down just a little bit more, there are a couple more there on the edge. So the lateral edge, I would say, is pluricetose because there are more than just like one pair of setae on each side. All right, we're getting to the end here. Elytron with at least odd numbered intervals with a row of large setigerous punctures, even intervals with or without setae. So this goes back to counting the lines here on the back of the wings. And remember, we count these from the outside in. Or from, sorry, no, we don't do that. We count them from the inside out. Whoa! Eggs! Thank you for the raid. Welcome in, everyone. Hello, hello. For those of you that might not know me, my name is Evan. I am an entomologist, and currently, we are going through some beetles that I'm working on for an upcoming research project that a student of mine is going to be presenting at a conference. So we've been going through and looking at these different identifying characters here on these beetles and doing our best to identify them. Right now, we are going through a very in-depth couplet, kind of talking about the different characters that make this thing what it is. And right now, we are checking whether the odd numbered spaces between these lines on the wings have hair in them or not. Which sounds crazy. Stick with me, please. I promise it's cool. So when we count these intervals, right, you start from the middle of the body and you count towards the outside. So right here, this thickened line where you can kind of see it separating at the middle, this is the midpoint of the insect's body. Everything to the left is going to be essentially identical to everything on the right, but we are just counting from the midline out. Chameleon, it's seedy, Setae. It's different than hair because hair grows from the base, but seedy in insects, it's a determinate length when they become adults. So if these hairs break off or anything like this, they can't regrow. These are hairs that can help the insect feel things in its environment. And so if they break off, they're gone. But they do look a lot like hairs. So I swap between the two pretty often. But technically, they are seedy and not hairs. Imagine a bug with long hair. If you go back to the VOD from last Wednesday, we looked at some pretty hairy beetles. The Pleocomids, the rain beetles, they have a lot of like shockingly long seedy underneath the body. So they're out there, but nothing with like flowing locks. You can get some meal prep. Hell yeah, eggs. Thanks again for the raid, and thanks for stopping by with your community. Hopefully it's interesting for you guys. But yes, back to this beetle. If we start in the middle, we count. Oh, fuzzy guy. Thank you, Tortilla. Are the hairs on woolly aphids seedy? No, no. So the hair on woolly aphids is actually mostly wax. They have these like waxy secretions, but if you take a woolly aphid and you like try to clean it off with alcohol, all of the wax dissolves and they look like just like normal aphids. They do have like anchor hairs, which are or anchor seedy, I guess you would call them, that are attached to the body that those wax bits will build off of. Like it's a solid base that stays attached to the body. So they do have some underneath all of that, but if you take that wax off, they can actually regrow it. unlike seedy, like I said, which were fixed and would never grow back, that wax, they would just have to eat enough to be able to get the energy to reproduce that, and excrete more of that wax. So, okay, back to my crazy seedy ramblings here. The identification thing that we're looking at right now says elytra, which is one of these wing covers with at least the odd numbered intervals with a row of large satigerous punctures. So satigerous means containing a seedy. The puncture is where that seedy comes out of. So it's asking if there are these large dots with hairs coming out of them in the at least the odd numbered intervals here on the elytra. So if we count them, we start from this inside piece. This first section over is 1, then 2, and then this one that the pin is over right now is the third interval. So that is our second odd thing that we're looking at there. And there's pretty clearly a big puncture there that has hairs coming out of it. But let's keep going. 4. 4 does have some hairs in it. But remember, that couplet said at least the odd intervals, and then even intervals with or without seedy. So 3 has it, 4 has it, which is a sometimes. But then if we do just a little bit more of a turn, and I refocus this down for you guys. Don't want to go up, I want to go left. There we go. No, I'm messing it up. Bring it up. There we go. Okay. So I've turned it a little bit so we can see some of these outer segments. If we're looking here, again, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is 5, right where my pin is right now. And there's pretty clearly some dots with some hair. This is 6, which has a few but less. And then 7 is very, very hairy. 8 is got some, and then 9 is very, very hairy. So again, if we read that with at least the odd numbered intervals with a row of large satigerous punctures, even intervals with or without seedy. All of our odd intervals had seedy, and most of our even ones did as well. You could see the punctures pretty well from the side, but now if I turn it completely sideways, I'll maybe bump the... If you just keep an eye on this portion of the elytra, if you just keep your eyes like right here, I'm going to focus up and down so you'll be able to see some of the different planes of focus, and the hairs will come into and go out of focus. So you are just seeing the dots looking straight down at it, but it's easier to see the seedy or the hairs coming off of the body if you look at it from the side. And that's like one of those things that nobody really tells you, but once you figure it out, it makes a lot of sense, right? If the hair is sticking straight up, if you're looking straight down at it, you're basically seeing the top of the hair, which is a lot harder to see than if you're trying to see like the whole shaft of the hair on the side like this. So I'm just going to focus up a little bit, which should bring in the outer edges. And then if we go back down, you should see them slowly coming into view. And then they should just keep appearing as you get towards the middle of the body. So, we have now completed that couplet. And thankfully, for our sanity, that gets us an identification. That takes us to Euryderus grossus. And Euryderus grossus is actually the only species in the genus Euryderus. So, in the last couple of beetles that we've been looking at, that was a genus level key. That was taking us from Passamachus as a whole down to a species. But this key is actually trying to take us to genus. But because there's only one species in that genus, it also takes care of telling us what species it is. So that was a lot to go through to ask those questions and figure out like what all was happening with that beetle. But now that we've gone through all of that, we don't have to go any further because there is only that one species that matches this set of characters. And that's pretty cool. This is a fairly common grassland ground beetle all across the US. And it was one that you get familiar enough with to basically immediately recognize. 23, yeah, it's this one. So I'm going to tell you all a secret. I didn't need to go through all of that keying stuff because I knew exactly who this was as soon as I picked it up. But I did want to show you all going through the rest of that key, or going through that different part of the key, and again, looking at some of those very specific things that we were looking at and how overwhelming this can seem at times. But yes, that is a very easy one once you've actually seen it once, because that really big projection on the leg that Tortilla called the hitchhiker's thumb, very unique, pretty obvious. Having all of those hairs down the side of the pronotum, very obvious. You only ever see that in a few groups. And then those two other things combined with having those big dots with the CD on the elytra, dead giveaway that that's Euryderus. There's nothing else in the US that looks like that, and as far as I know, I mean, there is no other Euryderus. So as long as it has those, it's Euryderus grossus. That's it. Okay. Let's get moving again. For the Raiders, if y'all are still here, most of the samples that we're going through today are actually this genus, Passamachus, or the warrior beetles. So these are large, dark ground beetles. And as I said when you guys came in, I'm working through these specimens for a project that we're working on right now. And because of that, these are all collected at the same site over the course of a few months. And because they're all from the same site, it's not very surprising that we're seeing a lot of repeats of the same species. But we do have to double check every single one just in case. So I am going to run to the restroom real quick. I will keep you guys on this beetle, and then we'll get back to keying in just a second. Talk amongst yourselves. Are we still here? Did I lose stream? No, looks like we're still up. Okay. It's raining. It's raining right now, and the lights flickered a little bit. So I wasn't sure if the stream would have gone down. Okay, very cool. We're all still here. Nice tad boat. It's like you could tell. Nice weather we're having. It's pouring outside right now, which is nice. I don't mind that. It's Florida. It rains a lot, so not too bad. But yeah, I was just worried that stream may have cut out with the power blink. Reconnecting. Okay. You're good, Tad. It happens like every day in Florida. It rains all the time, so no big deal. I was just worried that we may have dropped, but if we're still here, we're good. We're good. Final update on the entomology guides. Google Books has a PDF version of Insects of North America. Okay, very cool. Thanks for looking into that, Mouse. Like I said, I don't really carry the insect guide out much, but I do tend to carry a physical copy of my bird ID guide. I like the physical thing, but it does get heavy and kind of annoying sometimes. So I can absolutely see why a PDF version would be very helpful. But like I said, I just didn't have the experience to really offer input about which one would be better or not. So thanks for taking a look at that. All right, back to what we were originally looking at is more of these Passamacus. So I'm pulling up the. Oh yeah, loading up on the field guides. I keep I have the back of my seat in my car is shoved with field guides. That's where I keep them. I kind of keep a mini library at the car. Um, I won't generally carry them with me, but I do have them available should I find something really neat that I want to take a peek at. But the PDF thing is a very good idea. But then then you would have to carry, I guess, the extra batteries if you're going to be out there for a long time using your phone a lot to do it all. But whatever. Everyone has their own thing. But yeah, that should work. And again, maybe for those of you who missed our earlier discussion on it, this is the field guide that we're talking about at the moment. It's the one that I recommend for anybody trying to get into bugs in North America. It's just called Insects of North America by Abbott and Abbott. Do I have a list for bugs like people do for birds? That's a very good question. No, I don't. The my collection basically serves as my list of things that I have found or seen. Um, at least mostly for beetles. I don't really collect many other insects, but I do have a running tally of like things that I have seen that I don't collect. Um, so not like an official list, but I do have the collection as representatives of like the things that I have seen. Um, I use eBird a lot religiously, so eBird maintains all of my bird records, and then I have just a regular like Excel spreadsheet for mammals, herps, and fish. So each one of those has a tab, and then it has all of the information of where and when and what species, and then I try to link to an iNaturalist posting if I can. Um, I don't really use iNaturalist that much, but I do for kind of updating my life list of non-insect and non-bird things. Yesterday, for instance, I went out looking for snakes with a couple of my new friends here in Florida, and I actually saw my first Florida cottonmouth, which is a different species than the northern cottonmouth. And then we also found a timber rattlesnake, which was so cool because not only was that my first time seeing one, but the people that took me out had been out several weeks already this year trying to find them and have lived in Florida and had been looking for them for like 3 or 4 years. And the one that we found yesterday was their first one as well. So that was very exciting and very, very cool. I have the INAT postings of all that stuff now as well. And I have to update my spreadsheet to count for those. But yeah, it was such a gorgeous snake. I mean, I moved here from Arizona just a few months ago, and Arizona has 13 different species of rattlesnakes, so we saw rattlesnakes all the time. But I grew up on the East Coast and had never seen a rattlesnake. And I lived in Florida in, roughly the same area that I do now for 4 years during undergrad, and I had never seen a timber before. So it was pretty special. It was a very cool thing. I have a lot more interest in snakes than I did before, so it was a very, very, very cool sighting. As my first like big eastern rattlesnake. We did see a little pygmy rattlesnake yesterday too, so that was fun. But I had seen one of those the last time that I lived in Florida. So now I just have to go out, find an eastern diamondback, and I've checked off all the rattlesnakes in Florida in September, August, in like about 2.5 months. But yeah, timber was gorgeous. I posted it in the regular Maya Discord, but there's not really a place in the bug cord for non-bug things. Do I have a dream list of bugs you want to encounter in the wild or see in an ID setting? Yes, absolutely, snakefly. Um, there's a lot of good stuff that is in Florida that I just have never seen before. Um, when I lived here a few years ago, I was just starting my entomology journey, and so I didn't have a group that I worked on yet specifically, and I didn't really know how and where to go to look for things. So coming back now with all of the accumulated knowledge of everything that I've worked on since then, um, has been really neat. And we went out last weekend and did a little bit of collecting at one of the research properties that we're affiliated with. And this specimen right here, this is Eucharis vericornis, which is a ground beetle, which is the group that I specialize on. But this is the first time that I had seen this species in the wild, and only like the second time that I have specimens of them. So it's not rare per se. You know, it's an eastern thing that I had just not encountered living out west. So this was really exciting for me, and probably has been the coolest thing that I have found since I've been back. Um, I do have a list of targets in some ways, but it's mostly fun for me to see things that I have not seen before. So new stuff is definitely high up there, but I think someone's asked me this question before, and I'm pretty sure my answer was the violin beetle, which is a very flat ground beetle that most people know from Animal Crossing. Um, but it's a ground beetle that looks like a violin, and it's super, super flat because it lives between the shelf fungus, uh, and will be going in and feeding on other beetles and other insects and stuff that are in that fungus setting. So they're really flat to squeeze between the layers. And those are over in Southeast Asia, and I would have loved to have seen one. I went to Thailand last summer, and we were in the wrong part of the country to find those beetles, but um, I think those would be like very impressive to see in the wild, because it's, one of the longest, one of the largest ground beetles on Earth, and it's just such a unique thing. They've got a really unique biology. Um, but anytime you see something new, for me, it's quite exciting. Do you always have collection bottles at all times, or for those occasions? Yes, absolutely, Mouse. I do. Um, I have bottles or little screw top vials on me at all times. I have at least one in my pocket anytime I leave the house, just in case. We talked about this not too long ago on stream, and don't worry about repeating things because there's new people here all the time. But I learned quickly getting into entomology, like when I had to make collections for class, that the times that I didn't have something to collect them into was the time that I was going to see something that I needed. And so over the years, I've been burned by not having a vial too many times to not have one on me at any given time now. I've collected them in a glasses storage case. I've picked up like a Gatorade bottle off the ground and used that to collect the bug. I have a little pill holder on my keys that's for my Lactaid, but I've occasionally dumped out the pills to put the beetle in there or whatever. So I do have something on me generally at any given time, but if I don't, I will improvise until I do have something that I can put it into. So getting back to our Hasamachus guy here. For those of you who may have not been here when we started stream, this is the mostly of what the sample here makes up. And so there are 4 things that we're checking to see whether or not they're all the same species. And the first thing is more of those places where the hairs attach to the body, but underneath the abdomen. So you can actually see the hairs pretty well here, but you can definitely at least see the punctures if you can't see the hairs themselves. So like there, there, and there. If those are present, we're going to go one way in the key, but if they weren't there, we would go the other. But the problem is, like I said before, explaining the hairs, is that if they break off, they don't reform. So even if there weren't any visible CD on this, we would still follow the way that tells us, yes, they have those CD, because you can see where the punctures, or like where those CD are attached to the body, even if the CD themselves aren't there. Little bitty levers. Wrong lever! So that takes us to 5. Oh, okay. Pronotal and elytral margins vivid metallic green. So the pronotum is this little piece behind the head. It's right on top of where the first pair of legs attaches. So here. And elytral margins are here. I don't see any green on those margins, so it's not that species. And that one also says Arizona only. This individual was collected in New Mexico, which is right next to Arizona, so I wouldn't be... There's always the possibility, that ranges are extending, so I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable separating this thing out if it was only like, oh yeah, this one's found in Arizona and this one's found elsewhere. But because this one doesn't have any green on it, I know it's not Viridans, which is the one that's supposed to only be in Arizona. So just based on range, I wouldn't feel comfortable, but because that's in combination with something else that we're able to observe, this is not Viridans. Okay, now we have to check the intercoxal process. So we're looking at this little bit here between the front legs and whether or not it is basically hanging down. We're about halfway, Roxers. I would say we're about halfway. Whether this process here is projected down below the front coxa or basically in line with them. And this one's tricky because I can very much see why people would assume this one is projected, but comparing it to one where I know they're actually projected, this is not. So we're going to call this flat. And then the next couplet after that asks if elytral striae 7 and 8 are raised or costate, which is just kind of like a raised bump. So here, if we count from the middle, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is 7, and this is 8. So you can see that those ones are a little bit more ridged. They're a little bit taller than the other ones that we have around it. So that is, in fact, costate and raised. So that is telling us that we are looking at Passamachus duplicatus, which is the one we have been finding most often. So that's all right. Another button. Thank you, Tortilla. All right, so that was that sample. Moving on now. But now that we're familiar with it, now we can kind of speed run a little bit to get through these a little bit faster. And I don't know how well they're going to show up for you just because it's set for my focus so I can check things. But this has punctures. This is not green. This has the flat intercoxal process. And then we have yeah, okay. We've got the two raised intervals over on the other side. So that's also duplicatus. And when I turn around like this, I have a data sheet that I'm working on the other screen because I need to attach ID labels to all of these and send the data to my collaborators. So I'll just send them an Excel sheet, essentially, that tells them what all of the different sites were and where all of the beetles came from. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Uh-oh is right. This is not Passamachus. But have we seen this before? The only other one that we've gone through and identified before, right, was that Eurydaris, the very hairy one. So let's go through and double check just to make sure that this is what we're looking at. So the first thing we check is the hitchhiker thumb. It has that expanded front tibia that has that spike. We got a thumb. That's correct. Now we look at the sides of the pronotum. Does the side of the pronotum have many hairs? Or are there just one? There's just one pair. Hard to tell. Again, the light is a little bit bad. But you can see that up towards the front, there's at least 4 that are in focus right now. So that's pluricetos. That has multiple setae on the edge of the pronotum. So that also checks out. And then if we look at the back, Liz, hello. Welcome in. Doing some extracurricular Beetle ID this week. And remember that last part of the couplet asked about the odd numbered intervals having large pits that have setae in them, and sometimes the even ones as well. So if we check here, 1, 2, 3. 3 has big punctures and setae. 4, there's a couple. 5, there's definitely a bunch. 6, I don't really see any, but 7, there's a bunch. So, based on all of that, and based on our prior experience and familiarity with identifying this species, because we've already looked at it for this project, this is Eurydaris grossus again. Good job, chat. So that's what I'm talking about in this aspect of, like, if you see things and you get very familiar with them, over time you pick up on the vibes, but also some of these characters that are actually very easy to see. This one worked through a lot quicker than the last one, because again, we've walked through that crazy mouthful of a couplet, and we understand now what all of those things, or at least we sort of understand what all of those things meant. So now we were able to reapply that the next time we saw this specimen. And even though this is probably only your second time seeing that species, if you go through a bunch of identification stuff doing North American ground beetles, boy howdy does this thing show up a lot. And it's convenient because it's a very easy ID. So if if they send you 1,000 beetles to identify, and over however many sites they had, there were 200 Eurydaris, that's like a really quick fifth of your identifications done. So as you work with things more and as you get more familiar with them and see them more often, these identifications are not too terrible. And we can sort of speed through them like we've been speeding through the Passamacus a little bit. Now, I do have bad news. That was the last non-Passamacus beetle that we have to identify. So the rest of this is going to be a bit of the speed run to finish these off. And then I am probably going to call it for the day. We've been going for about 3 hours, which is a pretty good off day stream. I will be streaming again tomorrow night on our normal, Monday night adventures, and we'll look at some other new stuff that I've picked up recently. But I need to get this data sent off tonight or tomorrow at the latest, so I want to make sure I finish. And I will need to swap out microscopes to identify that last Bembidion species that we looked at earlier. So I'm gonna go through these last ones pretty quick and just see what we are working with. Hey, Nikki. How are you doing this weekend? So we've got punctures. It's not green. Flat process. And raised intervals here and here. So that's another duplicatus. And the only one for that site. That's not too bad. Yeah, Grungles, I'm about to BLJ the shit out of these beetles. You can use the CD skip to get there quicker. So, punctures, yes. Green, no. Flat process. Yeah, that's flat. But now we are back to Yes, Tortilla. Yes. So this one doesn't have that raised last stria here, but it does have the very short humeral carina right here. So Tortilla nailed that. This one is Passamaquis californicus. Tortilla's speedrunning. This isn't even her project. 24. See. 28. Okay. Okay. Punctures. Yes. Green. No. Flat interval. Yes. Raised lateral carini. Yes. Duplicatus. Boom. Four. Here. Okay. Punctures. Yes. Green. No. Flat interval. Or flat process. Yes. Raised 7th and 8th. Yes. Duplicatus. Pop it. Twist it. They do have oh, do I not have it with me? No, it's downstairs because I used it already. You guys are funny today. There are things that are called specimen manipulators, which is like a little piece of foam that you can put the pin into so you can flip it upside down and you can like change the angles of things like that. Uh, I figure that they're slower. Um, if I'm able to switch things around and check it really fast. But if there's like a very small character that I need to zoom in on and I can't have my hands shaking or, vibrating at all, I will put them into the specimen manipulator. And you've probably been seeing me use these throughout the thing. Like we have just like the little cork stand here. It's just a wine cork with a cork base on some wood that keeps it steady. Or I will also put them into this like white piece of foam with a hard back that I've been using here. But somebody a number of years ago came up with the design that used Lego pieces. And so when I travel, I have a little pencil case that has pins and forceps and all the stuff that I need to like do curation at museums and stuff that I visit, to identify things, to put labels on things, et cetera, everything that I would need for that into a little pencil case. And in there, just in case whatever museum that I'm going to doesn't have foam or doesn't have quite what I need for it, I have one of the Lego insect manipulators in there that I travel with in case I need something that the museum just like doesn't have available for me. So you can definitely do that. Lego are in fact good for everything, except for my wallet. Bad for my wallet. Yeah, John, I don't know how that works. I don't think they patented the design. They might have, but they definitely published on it. There is like a scientific paper out there that explains like their different designs and how to make it and whatnot. But I don't know if they actually patented the design or not. But it was very helpful. They gave you a they gave you like a piece list, so you could just take it right from the paper, upload it to Bricklink, and then just buy them. And when I was doing my masters, um, I ordered a bunch of pieces because I was, making one for myself. But I ordered enough pieces so I could build like, multiples of them. And so that year for Christmas, I gave all of my lab mates the specimen manipulator with a pinned photo of whatever their study organism was, and then like a little explanation on the back of like what this thing was. And it was a huge hit. Everyone in my lab loved it, and I know that some of them still use them to this day, which is quite nice. Um, but there's lots of different ways that you can do it. Another one that's like very common is just like a slab of clay, because you can like build the clay up to make it a little bit taller. You can turn stuff sideways and whatnot with it. But then sometimes you get the pinheads covered with clay, and it's not ideal. But I will find that specimen thing before tomorrow's stream, so we can take a look at what that is and how that works. But it's downstairs because we did a little bit. I took it with me when I went to Orlando to pick up that really large loan of beetles that I'm identifying right now, because I thought I would be identifying them down there rather than bringing over 5,000 beetles home with me. But that's how it works. But I have them downstairs, so I'll go find that. Like I said, sometime before tomorrow. So we got punctures, sure do. We got green, sure don't. We have flat, or intercoxal process, and we have short. We have short humeral carina. So that one, another Californicus. Okay. Puncture, yes. Green, no. I'll call that flat, short, carina there. That is another Californicus. Can you stop highlighting things, please? Thank you. 25. Ooh, 3 specimens in this trap. Puncture, yes. Green, no. Flat process, yes. Short. Californicus. One Californicus, but there's 2 other specimens from this sample, and they are a little bit smaller, so I'm gonna guess that these are duplicatus, but double check everything. Have punctures, no green, flat process, and there are those 2 raised lateral edges again. So that's 1 duplicatus and punctures, no green, flat, 2 intervals. Good. So that segment, or that site was 1 Californicus, 2 Duplicatus, 20. There's 2 specimens here. Punctures. No green. Flat. 2 lines. Duplicatus. Hi, Afton. That was quite the stream last night. I hope you were able to at least get it out of the carpet. Because that was a bold choice to do it on carpeted flooring. So we've got punctures, no green, flat process, 2 raised lines there. All right. Those are 2 duplicatus. Good fun getting it out. Yeah, I bet. You need to raise your prices there, girl, because 5 subs was not enough to do that. Right. Punctures, yes. Green, no. Flat process, 2 raised lines. Duplicates. Well, gotta hydrate. Good thing I refilled when I went to the bathroom. Liz, thank you. He made he made that 5 subs, but it took like 100 subs to restart his paper coloring. Is he for real? That's wild. That boy ain't right. Super nice though. I hung out with him quite a bit when I stopped by Alveus. Very, very nice guy. Alright. The punctures. No green. Flat process. 2 bars. That's duplicatus. It has to be a lot more than that, Tortilla. I've gone down the modifications route. Got a lot of tattoos. I got my ear pierced when I was 3, and then I didn't get anything else pierced again until I was like 22. And I'm happy where I'm at the moment. I've never had the desire to dye or do anything. I've never had the desire to dye. That's not true. I've never had the desire to dye my hair or anything like that. So I don't think we're doing I don't think we're gonna sign up for an eyebrow slit no matter how many subs there are. But yeah, 3. So my mom is fairly heavily tattooed and fairly heavily pierced. She has got like more than 10 piercings in each ear. And then my dad had full chest, full back, full sleeves, like super tattooed up. And he had gauges in his ears. And so when I was a kid, I asked to get my ear pierced. And they were like, "No, you're too little." And I said, "But you guys have your ears pierced. I want to get my ear pierced. And so they said, okay. They took me to the mall, red flag. But this was, again, in the 90s. So, like, you know, y'all, everybody got their ear pierced at the mall. And we went in, and they said to me, apparently, like, Tortilla, you know it. You know it was piercing pagoda. They didn't have Claire's yet at that point. So, at least I don't think they did. So, yes, piercing pagoda in the mall. I got my ear pierced, and apparently the deal was, since I asked for it, I was able to go get it, but then if I didn't cry, I could go to the toy store and pick something out. Yeah, right after, like, that's such a deal. And apparently it was like the fastest process in the world. I only have the one done. So I got the ear pierced, whatever earring they put in, and then I just like started wandering off to go to the toy store because I didn't cry. It didn't hurt like at all. Um, yeah, I didn't cry. I don't remember this. I was very very little, and this is secondhand coming from mom tomology about what happened when I was a kid. I've just kind of like always had my ear pierced from what I remember, and then I started trying to stretch it like a little bit in like seventh grade, but then it's allergic to the metal. They both became infected. Oh my god! Oh my god, Tortilla, no! That's horrendous. Um, yeah, so I had the one ear pierced. I started trying to stretch it like a little tiny bit in seventh or eighth grade, probably. And then I didn't wear my earring for a long time. But since I had it for so long, I've never had any issues with it closing up. Um, and then I started wearing it a little bit more often. I found an earring that I liked, and I just kind of wore that one for a long time. Um, but then yeah, in college, I was like, man, I want to get my nose pierced. That sounds cool. And so I went, and for Christmas, I got myself the nostril piercing because I figured that getting the nostril and the nostril and the septum at the same time felt like a lot because I was going from one ear piercing that was 20 years old at this point to getting other stuff done. So I got the nostril done. It was totally fine. And then like 2 months later, I got the septum done. The nostril, worst one. I'll say it. My septum healed so nicely. I had no problems with it. But my nostril was fucked. It hurt so bad. And yeah, it was not pleasant. There was a couple times where like even just touching it hurt real bad. And the only way to like relieve the pain from it was to start to take it out to like release whatever weird pressure was building up in there. And it hurt like it was kind of the pain where you like start to black out a little bit. It was so bad. Um, but then it healed up totally fine. So we're good, and I am fine on my piercings for now. I don't really have a strong desire to get anything else done at the moment. Um, but I will. I could always use another tattoo. But I lost my tattoo artist in the move, so that's a bit of a bummer. I have to scope around to see if I can find something good in Florida or save up, go back to Arizona, and then just get a lot of tattoos at once. Oh, the tragus? I've heard that one's bad. Yeah, ugh, no. I'm good with my one lobe over here. I've thought about getting the other one just for you know, balance. I could do a mix and match on the earrings or whatnot, but I kind of like the process of having like buying a pair of earrings and then having a spare one because I can only wear one at a time. That if I lose one, I have a backup instead of like, oh, I have a pair, I'm wearing them both, I lose one, and then I've got like a mismatched earring. So I don't know. I'm good for right now, but seconds and orbitals. Yeah. I love the way piercings look. I think it's so cool. I like all this crazy stuff that people do with them. Just not for me. I don't think not my preferred. But all that's to say, I will probably not be slitting my eyebrow anytime soon. Uh, I am old now, so I am worried about my hair as it is. We don't need to be taking any more directly away on my face. All right, we've got one, two, three, four, five. We only got 6 Beatles left. So many more ear piercings if it was free. I would be a goddamn coloring book if tattoos were free. I totally feel the same way, Tortilla. All right, let's knock these last couple out here. See what we got going on. Punctures, yes. Green, no. Flat interval, yes. Relatively short humeral. Let's try it. No green. Californicus. Punctures, yes. Green, no. Flat, yes. 2 raised antennal uh, elytral striae, yes. That duplicatus. You're waiting for one to be green. Are they? I'll see if I can find the green one for tomorrow, Tortilla. What did I say? What do I need? Specimen, manipulator, and P viridans. I'll find my green. I'll find my green species, and I will show you tomorrow. How vividly metallic green they are, because it is very cool. 34. Yes. Okay. Punctures. Yes. Green. No. Flat. 2 raised. Duplicatus. Chance you will be in a conference or at a bar. Lucky you. I'll post it in the bug cord then. Not a big deal. You'll get to see it eventually. Yeah, conference bar stuff. We just got our travel approved for the National Entomology meeting, so I'm going to be going to that in like a month from now. Very excited about that. Punctures. No green. Flat process. Mm-hmm. No raised edge. relatively short humeral carina. That, my friends, Californicus. On. Oh. Oh. Yours sounds a lot more intense than mine. I'm gonna go hang out with other other people that can speedrun Beetle IDs. Online child exploitation is crazy. I don't. NECMEC. That's the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Yeah. That's it. Tortilla, I have no idea what you do for work. I I have no guesses, and this has just made me like incredibly confused. But that's very important work. So thank you for that. No green, flat thing, short. That's Californicus. And last but not least, punctures. Yes. Green. No. Flat process. Yes. No raised, relatively short carina there. That is a wrap. That last specimen there was P. californicus. And we have just gone through and identified 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 44 specimens. Not that many. But it was fun going through them with all of you and explaining the process. This would have taken me maybe like 15, 20 minutes if we were not doing them all together. But that is okay. As always, thank you all for being here. I do really enjoy interacting with you all and getting people excited about this sort of stuff. So even though it did take quite a bit longer than it would have normally, y'all learned a little bit more now about ground beetle anatomy stuff. You did learn about the goo and the bug. Nicole left, and then we learned more about the goo and the bug, but that's fine. Yeah, not a problem, Tad. Not a problem at all. I am going to send y'all to the animals now. We're going to raid over into Alveus. And I shall see you all again tomorrow night. I'll grab the specimen manipulator, I'll grab the green beetle, and I'll grab some other fun stuff that we can take a look at. I don't really have anything specific planned, but we'll figure it out. All right, y'all. Thanks for hanging out. I will see you tomorrow night or potentially Wednesday for pre-chat chats. See you later.